Are you contemplating a trip to Japan with the kids? Well, the good news is that Japan is a safe, child-friendly place and a great destination for a family holiday. Japan is full of friendly people, fantastic food and beguiling culture, both modern and traditional. It also has a number of other things you can take advantage of, such as first-rate public transport. That said, Japan is not always the most intuitive place, and there's a lot to learn about travelling there, so this series is all about sharing tips I've picked up across my many trips to Japan, which include 3 family holidays. This video will cover off transport and getting around, while the other videos will tackle accommodation, food, and advice for how to spend your time. Let's get into it. First though, when should you come to Japan? Well, it depends on what you want to do obviously, but I'd definitely avoid bringing kids to Japan in summer. Summer, particularly in the big cities, is brutally hot and humid and will make everything you do more of a chore than it needs to be. Spring and autumn, on the other hand, are ideal times to visit. The weather is far more moderate and you can tap into other attractions such as cherry blossom season and the fall leaves. If you're looking to take the family skiing, you can brave the winter cold or potentially look at coming at the start of spring as the season extends into March and even beyond. Most people coming to Japan for the first time fly into Tokyo, so here's one tip if that's what you're going to do. If at all possible, try and land at Haneda Airport as opposed to Narita. Haneda is much closer to the city and much more convenient. Once you've landed, one of the first things you should do is get IC cards for every member of the family that needs to pay for public transport. IC cards make getting around heaps easier and are one of the most essential things to have in Japan in general. There are tons of different brands that are functionally the same and work throughout the country, such as SUICA, Pasmo and ICOCA. You put money on these cards and you can then use them to tap your way through almost all public transport. This option is obviously much more convenient than buying tickets for trains or dealing with change on buses. IC cards are also widely supported elsewhere. You can use them on many vending machines, in convenience stores, and in plenty of restaurants and shops too. Topping them up is as simple as using a ticket machine at a train station or visiting a Conbini. I'd highly recommend getting adult and child IC cards for everyone in your family that needs to pay for public transport, as it just makes life so much simpler. That said, if you're flying into Tokyo, your options, as of publishing this video at least, are limited. Since August 2023, sales of most SUICA and Pasmo cards in Japan have been suspended due to chip shortages. There are ways around this, however. You should still be able to get both the Welcome SUICA card and the Pasmo passport. These are special tourist cards that expire after 28 days, so you need to ensure you spend the balance on the card before you leave. These days, you can only get Welcome SUICAs from select counters and vending machines at Haneda and Narita airports in Tokyo. Pasmo passports are available at the airports too, but can also be purchased at various train stations throughout the city. If you have an iPhone, it's actually a simple matter to get a virtual SUICA or Pasmo card. But if you need to get ICs for your kids, you're still going to have to find physical cards anyway. It's also worth pointing out that I still need to top up my virtual SUICA at convenience stores using cash, as I can't actually add to the balance with any of my credit cards. Just so you know, this is an ongoing issue with foreign Visa cards. I've never had any problems using my cards in Japan, but doing things like topping up my SUICA through the app or buying Disneyland tickets through the official online site simply haven't worked. To date, it's just SUICA and Pasmo sales that have been suspended, so if you're flying into somewhere other than Tokyo, there'll be a different regional card available, and this will also work all over Japan. In Osaka, for instance, you should still be able to pick up an ICOCA card. With that out of the way, there are tons of options for getting around. If you're moving around within a city, you'll soon discover that the public transport is pretty incredible. Whether you're on the JR lines or using one of the subway services, in the big cities it's rare to wait more than a few minutes for a train, making getting from one place in a city to another super efficient. It also helps that stations have plenty of English signage, and this extends onto the trains themselves, which usually have English language station info and announcements.
The rapid train bound for Tokyo will soon arrive on track number 1.
And now that we all have supercomputers and internet access in our pockets, the once daunting task of actually navigating the many train lines in a megalopolis like Tokyo has suddenly become a whole lot easier. I personally use Google Maps for 99% of all my travel planning and travel execution in Japan. The app lets me set a bunch of parameters such as departure time or arrival time, and any route I select factors in walking time and generally has platform numbers as well as which exit to take when leaving a station. You can suss all this stuff out in advance too, so when you're planning each day's itinerary at home, you can get a sense of how easy or hard it is to get from place to place. And then when you're there, you can lean into it pretty heavily. If Google Maps says the train you want is leaving at 2:34 from platform 25, and there's a train listed at that time on that platform, I'll generally just hop on and it almost always works out. Like I said, Japan's trains are reliable and crazy efficient. Even so, Google Maps isn't perfect, and I've certainly found it's given me inaccurate information from time to time, particularly when it comes to buses and train travel in more out-of-the-way places. I typically try to cross-check that kind of stuff either at tourist information centres or by asking at bus stops and train stations. Google's walking directions also aren't always as efficient or easy to understand as they could be, particularly when navigating dense urban environments like Osaka and Tokyo. Japanese cities tend to have a lot of levels, Jerry.
Levels.
So the best way to get somewhere might be along one of the extensive underground walkways connecting different subway stations or up along an overpass. You need to pay particular attention to floor numbers too, as big stations, shopping complexes and entertainment districts tend to have a lot of verticality. Google Maps will certainly point you in the right direction, but the optimal route may not be obvious. Coming back to the trains, one thing you should bear in mind is that even as efficient as they are, they still get stretched to capacity at times. The trains can get insanely busy during peak hour in the big cities, and the only thing worse than being crammed into a carriage with 100 other people on your own is doing that with kids. It's worth trying to avoid peak hour travel during the week if you can. A city like Tokyo doesn't really get started until 10 AM anyway. Shops tend to open late and stay open late, so dodging the morning rush between about 7 and 9 AM isn't too hard. The 5 PM to 7 PM surge can be a bit trickier though. Another thing to know about travelling by train in the big cities is you'll generally have to switch lines a lot. This can be a major hassle with kids, as it means lots of stairs and lots of walking between, say, the JR exit and the subway entrance, or vice versa. Google Maps will typically give you a few different options for getting from place to place, so you can try and pick the most straightforward route. There are even checkboxes you can select for fewest transfers and least walking, which can be invaluable. And in general, when travelling with kids, always try and allow extra time, particularly when you've got transfers to make. Oh, and when you're leaving the station, pay attention to the exit Google Maps tells you to take. Some stations have dozens of exits, and getting back to street level in the most convenient spot to reach your destination will save you a heap of time, and a whole lot of grumbling from your kids. If your map app of choice doesn't give you an exit, look at where you need to go in relation to the station and pick the most likely option. One thing to keep in mind, if you look at a map in a station, they're almost never orientated with north at the top, so orient yourself towards north before you decide which exit you should head towards. Trains almost always have priority seats reserved for the elderly, pregnant women, families with young kids, and so on, so look out for those and hopefully at least your kids will be able to sit down some of the time. Stations generally have elevators to and from the platforms too, so if you have a stroller or bags, they can be helpful. Just bear in mind that you often have to go out of your way to find them, so yeah, more walking. As far as train fares go, if your kids are 12 or older, they pay the adult fare. If they're 6 to 11, they pay a kids fare, which is 50% the adult fare. Kids aged between 1 and 5 travel for free. At least they do if there are enough adults accompanying them. The rule, apparently, is 2 children per adult. So if you have 2 adults somehow travelling with 5 kids aged between 1 and 5, good luck with that by the way, you'd have to pay a kids fare for the 5th kid. Infants that are less than 1 year old travel for free and I assume aren't included in the rule I just mentioned. One last thing to note. Say you're travelling on the Shinkansen and want to get reserved seats. If a child aged 5 or under is going to use a reserved seat, they're meant to pay the child's fare. Otherwise, they're fine to sit in your lap or you can go in an unreserved car where they're okay to have their own seat if available. Fares for buses follow similar rules to trains, while highway buses also generally offer cheaper fares for children. If you're renting a car, meanwhile, children under 6 must be in a child seat or booster seat in the rear of the car. Inquire in advance to make sure enough kid seats are available before you rent the car. Taxis, meanwhile, are exempt, so just make sure your kids buckle up or sit on your lap or are in a sling. Highway buses are a cheap option for getting around, but really the least painful way to move between major destinations in Japan when travelling with kids is by express trains, bullet trains and regional flights. If you want to go from Tokyo to Osaka, for instance, there are bullet trains leaving literally every few minutes. You don't need to queue for a counter to buy Shinkansen tickets either, as the ticket machines have an English language option. You do need to get a ticket, however, as you can't tap your way onto the Shinkansen with an IC card. Each train has reserved and non-reserved carriages, with seats in the former costing slightly more. Since you're travelling with kids, I'd recommend trying to get reserved seats so you know you'll all have assigned seats and will hopefully be together. That said, you can consider using the non-reserved carriages if you know you're getting on the train at its first stop, as you can queue up and nab your seats out of the gate. It's also possible to book Shinkansen tickets online or through an app, but I've always just rocked up when I want to travel and bought them on the spot. Getting tickets ahead of time is worth considering, however, if you know you're going to be travelling on a particularly busy day, or you just want to have everything sorted in advance. Sites like Klook are an option, but if you can, I'd go through the official channels. For JR West, for instance, that's SmartEX, which also has an app, and for JR East, it's Equinet. I haven't tried using the latter, but I can sadly confirm that SmartEX generally doesn't like foreign Visa cards. I tried using 2 different cards during the registration process and got nowhere. Shame, because you can actually save a decent amount of money by booking your tickets more than 28 days out. If you've got a MasterCard or Amex, incidentally, you should be fine. Another thing to bear in mind is that there are express Shinkansen and there are those that make many more stops. The fastest you can get from Hiroshima to Osaka, for instance, is 1 hour and 20 minutes via the Nozomi, whereas the Kodama takes more than 2 hours and 45 minutes. If you buy your tickets from a JR counter, the staff will always put you on the fastest option. JR counter staff typically speak good English too. The Shinkansen are great, but they're not cheap, and they're not always the fastest option depending on where you're heading. If you want to go from, say, Tokyo to Fukuoka, a regional flight may well be both the quickest and cheapest option. Many flights within Japan are very competitively priced, and JAL even has a Japan Explorer Pass that foreigners can take advantage of for flat fare pricing. JR passes used to be the way to go if you wanted to travel around Japan, but since the huge price hike in late 2023, they're no longer even vaguely reasonable value. So in addition to domestic flights, I'd look into regional travel passes as well. There are a heap of them, and if one fits your itinerary, it may save you money and hassle. Before we finish, here are 8 more things to bear in mind about travelling in Japan.
なんで?
Make sure you have data while you're there. I can't stress enough how utterly essential this is. Sure, there's free Wi-Fi in some shops, public spaces, and at your accommodation, but being able to quickly look up transport or an address in Google Maps, or to translate a menu in a restaurant without any hassle, will make your life a lot easier. It's not that expensive anymore either. You can either get a Japanese SIM, add an eSIM to your mobile, or activate your existing provider's roaming plan if it's good value. Alternatively, you can rent a Wi-Fi unit, as that can be shared across multiple devices. That's probably the worst of the options, however, as it introduces the headache of managing the battery life on an additional device, plus it also becomes a problem if you split up. Conbinis in Japan are everywhere and fantastic. They're also the most convenient places to get cash out. They all have ATMs and international cards are widely accepted. While Japan is less of a cash society than it once was, you'll still need cash for smaller establishments. I've also found the further you go from the big cities, the less cards are accepted. Speaking of cards, the best way to avoid currency conversion fees is to pay in yen. I use a Wise Visa card whenever I'm in Japan, as it lets me pay from a stockpile of yen without any fees. Another option to consider is Revolut. It's a good idea to carry a hand towel or 2 with you, as, bizarrely, a lot of Japanese public restrooms don't have paper towels or hand dryers. Hand towels can also be good to wipe the sweat off if you're travelling in summer. Of course, as I said at the start, my advice is don't take kids to Japan in summer if you can help it. Consider whether you can make do without a stroller and just take a baby carrier instead. Strollers can be pretty cumbersome in busy Japanese cities. Mind you, so can carrying a kid that's a little too big for a carrier. If you do have a stroller, try to avoid trips where you're changing trains and stations a bunch of times. Finding a central spot to stay and then refining your itinerary in advance goes a long way here. Enormous suitcases are a bad idea in Japan in general. I've stayed in hotels where I could barely fit a modest-sized suitcase on the floor. They're also a pain on trains and buses. The overhead storage on the Shinkansen can actually fit reasonably large suitcases, but if your luggage is too big, you'll need to actually book a spot for it at the end of the carriage or in the luggage storage between carriages, which is an extra hassle. That said, you can always use luggage forwarding services if you really don't want to deal with lugging luggage. Changing facilities for babies are pretty widely available in major cities, so if you're in need of them, department stores are your friend. Not only will they have changing tables, but private areas for breastfeeding, as well as microwaves, formula makers, high chairs, and vending machines with juice, baby wipes, and diapers. Shopping malls also have changing rooms, as do many larger train stations. Not sure where the nearest changing room is? Try this app out, as it can tell you where the nearest one is located. I'll include links in the description. Finally, ask for help if you need directions or anything else. Japanese people are typically very accommodating and will bend over backwards to help if they can. And that's it for part 1. Still to come, my guides to eating in Japan, what your accommodation options are, and most importantly, how to spend your time. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any more of my Japan travel content. I'll see you in the next video, and Kampai.